Good morning, good evening, bonjour, bonsoir à tous, et bienvenue. Welcome to this week's Wada Forum. We are in our last forum of May. Next forum we will see you is in June. Glad to have everyone here with us today. For today's agenda, we are going to highlight some of the info actions currently on chain for vote, and then go into a discussion about what the next step is, in particular for the treasury withdrawal options. We'll see how much we get to on that today. I don't think anything has been officially announced, so we might keep it light on that side. I was hoping for a more specific announcement. Yep, but that's what we have for today. Next. Here are our knowledge base resources, good places to go to catch up on things if you want to read more. All right, our statement of purpose is to elevate underrepresented groups through the application of technology and invest in a more equitable future. En français, notre mission, élever les groupes sous-représentés grâce à l'application de la technologie et investir dans un avenir plus équitable. As you all know by now, probably our new meeting structure, these meetings like the one we're having today is more of an informal group chat with our hub members, our ecosystem members, but it's more kind of just us on Zoom, and then those bigger events that we're having at the beginning of each month, we're putting on Twitter. We are, however, reaching the halfway mark and are thinking about reevaluating that structure a little bit as far as how much time we want to spend on Twitter going forwards, and also possibly reevaluating the time to find out what best suits our community. So stay tuned for updates to our meeting schedule.
I'm sorry, I have let out.
Oh no!
Please, can you share?
Well, that's okay. I think next is really just going into the info actions, right? So, Nana Safo, I don't know if you're prepared for this. We could go over on a high level and just incite a discussion with the people who are here.
All right. So thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to everybody who has made time to join us today. I think we are going to have more like a case presentation, I would say. So please do well to follow me as I lead you on. It's going to be more like another presentation because we have had a couple of things going on in the ecosystem recently. And as some of you may be aware, it seems like the ecosystem has gone dead silent after the committee elections. And it is practically because we have gone through the process of selecting some budget proposals that we think we could sort of support for the year 2025 leading into 2026. And it was a lot of work for DREFs to do during those moments. And once we finished with the off-chain, the next thing was for Intersect to put these proposals that actually met the threshold into GAF tools as on-chain budgeting for action, so that DREFs can also finally, together with the constitutional committees, can vote on these particular budgets, so that they can finally begin to go through the other process of accessing the funds from the treasury. So I would say we've come quite a long way, and right now we are here. The budget info action that I'm referring to is actually online. It's active now, receiving voting from DREFs, and it actually housed about 39 different proposals who met the 50% plus one threshold that was used on Ecclesia for the voting process. And all of these proposals, 39 proposals, actually named Intersect as their administrator, and that is perhaps the reason why it is relevant for Intersect to sort of write a proposal and then, submit it on chain for voting. There we have. And there's a simple motivation behind this. And the motivation is the fact that, there was a Cardano vision and roadmap info action that also came online some few weeks ago, I would say. And it was also there to receive voting from DREPs. And I think even though it didn't necessarily meet the set threshold for it, the sentiment received from DREPs on that particular action, it was an info action, so it really has no effect on on-chain activities. But the sentiment received gave a clear indication that the community sort of wanted to support something like that as a roadmap for the next 5 years or so. So these proposals addressed several ecosystem needs, and typical among them would be the core development, also governance, and then also marketing, as well as open source tooling, and then finally the community infrastructure needs of the ecosystem. And in terms of the voting process for this particular budget info action, these budgets, like I mentioned earlier, these 39 budgets, initially, when the submission was open for the ecosystem, I think the ecosystem received about 194 proposals, different proposals, seeking to access the treasury for funding to develop whatever they wanted to develop. These proposals actually spanned over core development, governance tooling, community, community and innovation, stuff like that, marketing, all of those. And, they were all sort of assembled on GovTools and Ecclesia for voting, right? And then the final temperature check closed on May 5th, 2025. And at the end of the day, more than 3.8 billion ADA in voting stake participated. And that is about 70% of actively delegated stake at that particular moment. And from that, we had proposals coming from different angles, getting funded. Not necessarily getting funded, but getting the nod from DREV that, you could go ahead and fund these proposals. And I think I would highlight a few of them, just their names. I believe it will ring some bells in your heads, but just a few of them. So, for instance, the IOG engineering core development project went through, and that was actually requesting for about 96.8 million ADA. And then also the Catalyst 2025, which was also submitted by IOG, also, went through, and that was also requesting for about 69.5 million ADA. I believe that is something that we're all praying that it goes through successfully, because that is where a lot of us obviously tap our sources of finances in terms of executing our visions and our goals in the ecosystem from. And then also the IOG research program also, which was requesting for about 26.8 million ADA, also go through, as well as the Intercept Organizations Operations project also went through. That particular project had to go through a lot of stress because it wasn't looking good during the voting round. They had to make rapid changes and effects before the US actually began to have confidence. So initially they were requesting for about 20 million plus, but because of the changes they had to make due to demand by DREVs, they eventually ended up with something around 15.75 million ADA. And then also there's a Cardano Beta DAO, that's the infamous Cardano Beta DAO, which right now is sort of taking the stages, also requesting for about 12 million ADA, also went through. And then also there's a Tweak core project, also requesting about 11 million ADA going through, as well as Cardano Summit and event. We all know Cardano Summit, we all want to have the movement to sort of connect and network with other ecosystem partners and individuals. So yeah, it was a good project that people actually supported. 6 million ADA going through there. And there's a ZK Fold and a ZK rollup also going through with about 1.16 million ADA. And then there's a hardware wallet maintenance, which is Daedalus also going through with about 424.8K ADA. And then last but not the least, the Blockchain Java tools also going through with 99.6K ADA. There are several other projects that I believe if you hop onto GovTools right now and check on this particular proposal, you'll be able to get a full view of the proposal that went through for consideration by DREPs and constitutional committees. In terms of oversight and disbursement, it is primarily going to be the role of Intercept, right? And what they plan to do as an administrator here is to use the smart contract framework, which is multi-sig and escrow, and also go by the KYC and KYB compliance checks. So even though these proposals, when they go through, they need to now come through these various steps to ensure that they finally get access to the funds that they are getting from the Treasury. And then there's going to be audit mechanisms, of course, and milestone gating, as well as post-payment capabilities in case of violations of the contracts and agreements. And all disbursement obviously will be transparent and publicly trackable because it's blockchain. Anybody at all can just take the transaction hash and then also or the transaction ID and then track how things are going from there. And I mean, at this point, I would urge you as an ecosystem member, whether you are a seasoned contributor or partner, or you're just passionate about being part of the community, it is really your duty to do checks on these projects to see that really they are delivering what they promise to deliver, right? Because we are our own police, I would say. If you don't do it, there's nobody going to come to do it for us, so we have to do it ourselves. In terms of governance safeguards, all of these proposals, or let me say, this particular budget info action proposal that was submitted by Intersect, is actually subject to a net change limit. And at the time of submission, the net change limit was a 350 million ADA net change limit. Currently, there are two net change limits that are ongoing now. I think one is actually expiring today. I could just check real quick what the status is. But one is expiring today. I think when I checked, the last time I checked, it wasn't really surviving, I would say, if I have to put it that way, because it was not meeting the threshold for, being or getting ratified. But that said, there's another net change limit that is also, and that particular one is a 200 million net change limit, I say, and there's a 300 million net change limit as well, which is also up for voting currently as we speak. I think that is expiring somewhere on the 8th of June, but 200 million net change limit is actually expiring today, right? It is expiring today. And let me see where we are. Yeah, so it is now hovering about 42.83% yes votes and 43.13%, which means that the particular net change limit is perhaps not going to pass if the statistics stay like this until the end of day today. And what that means is that we would still be working with the 350 million ADA net change limit until the 300 million net change limit passes and overrides the 350 million net change limit. And each treasury withdrawal will require a governance action approval and also alignment with budget milestones and net change limit. And I think in terms of the governance actions for the treasury withdrawal, we probably will be discussing later on this particular call. There are several variations that are sort of popping up now to be considered. So I wouldn't say much about that. And Intercept, of course, may withdraw as administrator if due diligence fails. So, for instance, if any project at all during the due diligence phase is not delivering or meeting demands, then Intercept may decide not to administer them anymore. And what that means is that they would have to find a new administrator, and that now comes back to resubmitting a new proposal, stuff like that. And in terms of community impact, this particular proposal or this budget info action is supporting Cardano 2025 roadmap, as I put early, and any ongoing development. And what it seeks to promote keenly here is open source tooling, cross-team collaboration, strategic ecosystem growth, and also decentralized governance operations. And as you are here, if you are a DREP and you have not yet voted on this particular budget info action, I would encourage you to have a look at it and then place your votes. It's either you are voting no, or you're voting yes, or you're voting abstain on it. And then also, if you are a normal community member and then you're not a DREP, you're an ADA holder and you have not yet delegated to a DREP, I would urge you to find a suitable DREP to delegate to. And of course, as Wada DREP, I'm always happy to receive your delegation to be able to participate in governance on your behalf. So yeah, I'll drop my my DREP ID or my DREP profile in the chat so you can look it up and then you can delegate your ADA to me, Yeah. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And I'll catch with you again in the next section, which is the next discussion that has to do with the treasury withdrawal actions. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks everyone for listening as well.
Amazing. You kind of went through everything, didn't you? In such a short time. Like I said, we have our smaller group on these between week sessions. So I saw in the chat there's a thank you for the presentation. If anyone else wants to interject with any questions or comments in terms of where you stand on any of these info actions, feel free to do so. But I'll kind of transition the conversation now to what comes next. So Nana Safu kind of mentioned that, in particular for the budget actions, these are submitted currently as info actions. Now, what that means is that what will follow is a treasury withdrawal. And so I'm kind of sharing with you a little bit from the budget committee what we've been talking about. And I don't have a specific presentation at this time because it's going to be it's kind of still being worked on, but there have been some different talks on Twitter, and we will be releasing this weekend a poll on Ecclesia. I don't know if you've been familiar with the tool, but it's basically kind of parallel to GovTools, but a place to poll the community on some different ideas. Let's put it that way at the high level. So look out this weekend for some specific, brainstorming around how they should structure the treasury withdrawal. And, where this is coming from is kind of following the conversations that have been going on Twitter. It seems like a lot of I should say a lot of the top DREPs in particular. I haven't been listening to every DREP or seen every DREP participating on this, but especially some of the top DREPs are being very vocal about wanting, more visibility on the treasury withdrawal. So, as Nana Safu highlighted, kind of the main info action right now for the budget is a 275 million ADA proposal. So, there's some pushback against doing that as just one treasury withdrawal all at once. So that leads to question, okay, how exactly are we going to do it then? Is it going to be just breaking apart into percentages? Is it going to be split apart per project? Is it going to be split apart per category? Those are some of the different ideas that are floating around. But like I said, I encourage everyone to kind of stay alert because from my side, from the budget committee, it seems like we're trying to get out a poll to run over the weekend on Ecclesia to get feedback on how best we should structure that treasury withdrawal action. So that was kind of more of an announcement, but if anything I said or anything Nana Safu said triggered anyone to ask questions or go further, and I see Nana Safu, your hands up, so why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I guess we are already on this particular slide where we are discussing the treasury withdrawal options. Yeah, so I mean, what I was going to say is that in terms of these treasury withdrawal options, I think it is one thing that is very important for us as ecosystem. I mean, it's particularly for DREVs really and constituent committees as well. It is our duty really to ensure that what we are doing is transparent and it is setting the right precedent. But there are some issues that also as well needs to be attended to, and I think like you rightly put it, a lot of the other DREVs have put it on socials, on X, their concerns and what they think should be done. But for me, from where I sit, for instance, as a governance lead for WADA or WADA DREP coordinator, I would say it shouldn't just be about putting up a poll. And I don't really know what the structure of the poll is going to be about or going to look like. But I think it's really about the education. How or what is your plan as budget committee in terms of educating those who are going to participate in this voting with respect to what each and every item on the voting ballot, sort of represents. So, for instance, if we are voting for a percentage-based treasury withdrawal submission, what does it mean for the ecosystem, right? What are the pros and cons? Why would we go for such an option? If we are going for any other options, to what does it mean? What are the pros and cons, and what does it mean for the ecosystem to go by such what do you call it? Such an option. For instance, I know that if we are to go with allowing each and every single proposal to submit their own treasury withdrawal action, there's going to be a major con here will be the fact that some projects may not necessarily have 100K either to deposit, for like 1 month to see the fate of their proposal. And it also exposes them to a lot of other DRLs who probably did not want to support their project, but because others wanted to support it, it somehow made its way through and made a threshold, right? So this is it. And for instance, if we are also allowing Interset to sort of do
Wait, Nana Safu, I feel like I'm gonna miss out on a lot of your points. I need to respond to some of them, and we can do some back and forth. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I just was kind of trying to keep note of some things to talk about. But if it's okay. So, you're absolutely right. And it's kind of something we talked about on, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but in terms of communication and how do we improve communication. And I think some of us being, new, fresh eyes in these areas are going to hopefully offer some new insight into, how to improve in that area. I'll say, from joining the budget committee, I've really only been there for a couple of weeks. So there's a lot of things that are kind of already in motion, and it's a lot of, learning and getting up to speed at this point. So I haven't yet, come to any specific conclusions, let me say, about, how to improve communication, because it's still a little bit of an onboarding of how communication is already happening and trying to integrate into that. I will just respond though to, how the polling is going. So this is actually something I wanted to announce about, because I didn't realize this, before being in that internal meeting, but this Ecclesia tool is something that they put together to do more explicit polling. So it's kind of like a pre-vote where you can vote with your ADA on this polling tool. So it's geared towards DREPs to vote with ADA, and it's what they used to narrow down the budget originally, which is where we got to this 275 million ADA proposal, was kind of the line items that passed kind of the threshold that had been established for narrowing down through the Ecclesia tool. And now you're absolutely right in terms of, this process inherently allows some level of, unnecessary or extra funding to get through, extra projects to get through. And I think from my perspective, and this is taking off my budget committee hat and just as a community member perspective, is that that's okay. Many of us kind of were in early catalyst rounds. For example, you could kind of think about that, how it was much easier in some ways to get funding earlier on in Catalyst, or even like people who've gone through Singularity Net. Some of these things, you can get in early. There's less protocol in place. I don't know if there's such a big downside to some extra projects getting funded that, applied. They met some threshold. It's kind of also the nature of politics, whether we like it or not, that you're not going to be able to make everyone happy. So that's another kind of concern. And this is a bit to address something that's in the chat as far as the budget allocation. So there's this big info action that's been put out there on chain. It's going to either pass or not pass. if it passes, then there's a whole follow-up of how the Treasury withdrawals happen. And then there's a whole nother opportunity to kind of deny funding potentially. So that's kind of a concern that I have in terms of if this info action passes, let's just assume that that is the case. To me, it feels like those things should get funding. And maybe, well, not maybe, but definitely we need to improve our processes so that maybe it doesn't go like this next time. But allowing the info action to pass and then going back and then ending up not funding some of the things in there sort of doesn't quite click for me. But I kind of jumped in the middle. So I think I responded to some of what you were saying, Nana Safa, but why don't you continue and let me know if I missed anything.
Yeah, I mean, you've answered extensively, right? What I was asking, maybe the part you probably left out was what is probably going to be the structure of the pool. I mean, given that you're already on the budget committee, maybe you have an insight as to how the pool is going to be structured in terms of, is the pool going to provide details of what each and every option means for the ecosystem? Or it is going to be
I believe so. But like I said, what I've had access to is kind of a draft. So I can't, guarantee exactly what's going on to chain, or not onto chain, but onto this tool. But my understanding is it'll be a breakdown of the different options with a description, and the description should have some kind of like what the implications are, I expect. But either way, people on Twitter are kind of talking about that too. So maybe we can, put something together about it.
I mean, I'm sure you guys are going to listen, because right now where Interset sits at the moment, they really don't have anything to do than to listen to what the community is asking them to do. So I'm sure you guys will have to, pay keen attention to what the community is asking for and then just give it to them. Then we can all proceed from there, right? But I think one other factor that is really important is the fact that the net, I mean, is a net chain limit, right? And I think like I said earlier, it looks like the 200 million ADA net chain limit is going to, expire. It is not going to pass, because currently there's about 43.2% voting no and only about 42.3% voting yes, and with some abstaining there, right? So what it means is that it saves the community of the back and forth that we're trying to avoid, because we have had a lot of back and forth. And if this particular 200 million net chain limit should have passed, what it means is that a lot of other proposals who probably have been bundled to form this particular budget info action, if passed, would or may not be funded for the period with which they proposed. And that was going to be that was going to leave a very bad precedent for Cardano's governance and how we approach our budgeting and spending. So I think it's things are probably falling in place now. It is up to us for them to really determine how we want to run our business going forward. And I think that is also one thing that DREPs are very keen about. Particularly the Wada DREP, being very conservative, but as well being very efficient, because we can't be conservative forever. We need to make spending to ensure that we are progressing or developing with what the ecosystem needs. So yeah, it's all good. I think that is.
I think you're highlighting a good point, and this is now more me talking from the community perspective, but it's it's not the right precedent to be submitting all of these different net change limits, right? It's kind of creating so much extra work for everybody, for the DREPs, for the budget committee. Constantly, we don't know what the budget we're working with could be. So I think from that budget committee perspective, it's sort of like work with the rules in place until we officially know otherwise, because it's kind of just too much to handle to constantly have like a backup plan for every new info action that comes into place. So, there are definitely strategies, I think, that can be undertaken if this were to pass, but it's just some kind of perspective into what we all talked about in these SIP 1694 workshops in terms of, how crazy things can get once you put everything on chain for everyone to decide. Everyone wants to kind of submit their own ideas of what's right. And one thing that it's sort of bringing into light is that maybe something so serious as the net change limit should be something that's a bit more permanent. So not something that can be changed with just an info action. So that's another thing that I've heard brought up is maybe this kind of process of all these new net change limits being proposed, maybe it's really a call for us to come up with a more solid structure and implement that as a more permanent solution, like maybe write it into the Constitution or more explicitly into kind of the parameters, as opposed to allowing these kind of things every month to potentially change. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I do see Barney Emmanuel here. Barney, are you the one behind the Cardano Africa DREP run by Jeremiah?
Yeah, he's my junior brother. That's Jerry.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so are you part of that particular DREP as a team, or I mean, like,
Yeah. So
discussion. That's what I'm trying to drive at. What's your take?
yeah. So I'm a member in that listen.
Awesome.
I'm with him as a member.
Awesome. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think? How do you think the community should sort of proceed? Because definitely, after the budget info actions, whether being passed or expired, we need to move to the next stage. So, what do you think in terms of treasury withdrawal options?
Yeah. So with me, what would actually help the various communities or community members to leverage on opportunities that will enhance the liveness of these hubs is what we are actually looking for. And so if these new issues that are coming up will actually hold on to some of these things that we are anticipating, then we are all out for it. Yeah, so first, the African community should always be considered in some of these things, because most of the times, even when you look at our proposal, what do you call it, giving funds to our proposal, you realize that most of our African proposals don't even get up to the required number of funds that we need as compared to our other brothers at the other side. So our African brothers should be taken into consideration in terms of budget allocation, and for that matter, approving their proposals. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks for that input. Yeah, thanks. Megan, back to you.
Sure. Well, I mean, I kind of talked a lot. I don't have anything more specifically to say. Maybe what I will say is, you kind of mentioned that we should be talking more, voicing our opinions and things like that. I think another thing I'm noticing more and more is that, this idea of the voice of the DREPs, right? It really boils down to some of the really big DREPs, unfortunately. And I'm wondering where that conversation went. I recall a while back, I'm not sure what the framework was, but Nana Safa, we had you, we had Mercy, they were participating in these, I don't know if they were workshops or what exactly, but where we were kind of talking about some of these issues. So I'm not sure if that conversation sort of paused or if anything happened with that feedback. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm quite lost.
Oh, okay.
About the budget reconciliation workshop.
No, it was before that. It was more talking about kind of the landscape of DREPs and how to accurately capture the community's voices, because this whole idea of the delegation power equaling the voice of the DREP kind of skews power to really only be able to listen to kind of like, what is it, the top 10 or so DREPs, just because of how disproportionate the ADA is distributed.
Yeah, I mean that particular discussion. I mean, like it's probably going to be a forever ongoing discussion because it all boils down to delegators deciding how they want to delegate to DREPs, right? And I think before I go deeper into it, let me acknowledge Ayomi's message in the chat. So she's asking if Mercy is okay because she's not been seeing her on the call. Yes, Ayomi, Mercy is doing very well. She's in Ghana now. She's in Ghana currently and running some other project here. So some of the times his connection wouldn't allow her to be a part of this particular discussions or this call. But she's doing very great, and very soon you would see her back on call. Thanks for checking on her. Right. So to go back to the discussion, I would say, Megan, if delegators decide to delegate to those with huge delegations, then we'll continue to have these sort of discussions over and over again. But once delegators begin to realize that what they are doing to the ecosystem is not really something good but bad, and they refrain from delegating to the bigger ones or the bigger fishes, I would say, and they now decide to delegate to the smaller fishes, then we can begin to think of not having these discussions any further, because then what it means is that it has gone down to the delegators and they have now decided to listen to us and then do what is needed of them, right? I mean, we could look at other options like capping direct delegation and stuff like that, but that is also going to be something that has to be carefully articulated and planned and executed to ensure that it is not leading us to anything that is not going to benefit the ecosystem, right? So and for why I sit as part of the service committee right now, I believe that these and many more others are going to be a part of our topical discussions, at least in the next year, to ensure that these issues are resolved once and for all. But really, it all has to do with delegators, because even with SPUs, for instance, we have seen it, right, where this saturation point has been was introduced, yet you still see people delegating to stake pools who have reached their saturation points. You understand? So the education really has to go down. I think that is one thing that we are really going to hammer on our service committee this time around, to ensure that delegators understand that delegating your ADA to somebody with about 500 million delegation plus means you are not doing any good to the ecosystem, but rather you are doing harm, because now what you are doing is that you are contributing to you are contributing to rebuilding a centralized structure, right? And that is directly the opposite of what CF is supposed to introduce. So anybody on here as a delegator, anybody listening later probably as a delegator, I would urge you, if you are delegating to a very big, or a DREP with a very big stake, just know that you are not allowing the other DREPs to also function effectively, right? That is, you are not giving them enough of voice to be able to represent. So you may want to consider looking at the DREPs with a smaller stake, the ones that align best with you, your practices and your virtues. Then you delegate to them, and then we can begin to have the discussion of truly decentralizing these processes, right? And I think there's now thoughts or discussions about probably introducing an executive arm into this governance structure. I think that is now sort of a discussion that is gradually building up, right? So it is probably something that we can also look up to in the ecosystem. I think if something like that is introduced, then it can now begin to look at addressing some of these issues. But the question also has to do with how is it going to benefit the structure we are looking to, practice. I've already seen people objecting that, we don't need executive staff. We only need the legislative and the judiciary staff here. So it is up to us to figure out how to make these two organs or arms of government work properly for Cardano governance. Other than that, introducing a third arm probably might be too difficult for us to sort of handle, because we are already struggling with Interset and their role and how they have to even interact with the governance process and stuff like that. So, that is just probably on a lighter note. But for me, I think it really boils down to delegators deciding that, okay, you know what, I am not going to delegate to a big fish. I'm going to delegate to a small fish and help them grow from where they are. And I think that is where we can begin to have a very meaningful discussion about truly decentralizing this governance process.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. And maybe we're in the wrong audience. we need to clip that part and broadcast it loud and wide. But it's good. It's good stuff.
Absolutely.
Anyways, we're kind of wrapping up on our time for the forum today. So I'll just thank everyone who's here and say again, if it's true, if you do have questions, we have a couple more minutes. You could put them in the chat. But otherwise, maybe if there aren't questions, we can move into our outro music and chill here for a few minutes together.
I think Sam did put a question in the chat. I wasn't really sure what he was looking for, but I could read it and then maybe we can answer. So he's saying that in terms of the budget allocation, do we know whether there are plans to rebalance or reprioritize the allocations in upcoming governance phases with respect to intersect, catalyst, and technical development? Megan, you being on the budget committee, I think it's okay for you to sort of take the first bite, then probably I'll add up if I have any.
Oh, yeah. Well, I kind of didn't explicitly mention this before, but kind of mentioned before. This is a tricky thing, because from my perspective, it feels like there's this info action and it gets passed. And so is it appropriate to be reallocating things after that? Not necessarily, but then is there also maybe some level of flexibility that's needed? Probably yes. So I think it's a bit tricky in terms of exactly how, that can be done in a way that, maintains transparency, etc. And maybe that's, one of the concerns of having such a big budget altogether, is to some level there has to be some kind of flexibility. And then it's just how granular can that flexibility be, basically. But as things currently stand, that's not currently part of our discussion. And maybe that's part of the nature of me, being only on the committee for the last couple of weeks, because basically, what the hot topics right now that we've been discussing are really more about how to get the budget over the finish line. So there's possibly been conversations I haven't been involved in that were before then, and there might be conversations that happen after now that might, center around this. But as far as I know, that's all I would have to say for the time being.
Sure. And just to add to it, I think the answer to Sam's question will be determined through the poll that you guys are yet to conduct on Ecclesia. Because, for instance, if DREVs vote that, okay, you know what, we want you guys to present the treasury withdrawal actions in categories, then what it means is that it gives DREVs the opportunity to actually reprioritize how they want these allocations to be sort of funded. So, for instance, DREVs could vote for core development category and vote no for every other category that is being submitted. So what that would mean is that DREVs want us to prioritize core development proposals over every other proposal in this particular year, right? And then also, I mean, if we also go in with the percentage wise, then DREPs also would have the opportunity to sort of vote on proposals that they think are really, really, really important for the community because they had the highest vote threshold in terms of percentage, and then probably leave out the ones that had close to the 50, right, and not very far from the 50% or so. So I think that is something that we can probably begin to have a very serious discussion about as DREPs and as CCs when finally the poll has been conducted and the result of the poll is known to the entire community. Obviously, if DREPs do vote for Intersect to fill in a single treasury withdrawal action proposal, then what it means is that DREPs do agree that every other thing that is included in this particular budget info action is a priority and important for the ecosystem. So for that matter, it should be allowed to sort of receive funds and then implement. But if we get any other option as the preferred option for DREPs, then it means that what it means is that DREPs are now going to look at other ways of reprioritizing how the spending should go for this particular year. So that is something that we can look forward to. And I think it is going to be very interesting going on from there. We're going to see a lot of complaints, but I guess that's the only way we can grow the governance and make it a better one going into the future.
Yeah, I think Samuel summarized it in the chat. It's really up to the DREPs at this point. And the thing is, the DREPs, it just means everybody in the community, right? Anyone could be a DREP. Anyone is delegating to a DREP, so you can pressure your own DREP. Whether you're a DREP or not, let me say it this way: you can engage in conversations. You can be aware of what's going on, and you can also, pressure the DREPs to see things how you see it or engage in the conversation anyways. So that's just what I'll close on here. But thanks so much, Nana Safo, for all the good information. I think it was a good discussion. We got some good questions in the chat, so that's nice. And thanks everyone again for being part of our weekly forum space. Next week, we will be broadcasting on Twitter, but as always, feel free to join into the Zoom for more personalized access, access to ask questions and, join us in the chat, etc. But also feel free to watch on Twitter. And with that, I think we close this week's Wada Forum. Thank you, everyone, and good night. Good evening, good afternoon. Bye-bye.